Hello, good afternoon, friends. Let's get started. Next one is going to be Lakeside. So this is our Lakeside. And this one, I think this one was the most popular one. You have your instruction sheet and all your instructions and then all the goodies inside. You have several packets of paint with this one and several bags of glass. This one probably is the most involved, but it's not too complicated. You'll be just fine. You also have a tiny brush with this one, a little detail brush. So I'm going to set those aside. Figure out which side I want to do this on. Now here are some really deep nail holes. Some of them will have those deeper holes. I'm going to use the other side because I think this might distract from the trees. I need my cups for this one. Now you could squirt your paint out onto a plate if you wanted to. You don't have to use your cups because it does make it a little bit messier because you have to flip them upside down, but that's okay. We have a light blue, a dark blue, and a brown. We're going to start with the light blue. Squeeze that paint off to the side so I can cut the corner off. And then give myself a little pile here. I'm going to go ahead and do all of these actually. I'm going to go ahead and get them all ready so that we can blend our paint. Now we don't have to wait for it to dry. For me to squeeze those out. You don't have very much brown paint because you really don't need very much brown paint at all. You just use those for the tree trunks. And green. So I'm going to paint down below where the water's going to go, okay? So I kind of like to keep it in the bottom third of my piece. Again, a rough coat. Very rough coat of paint. I like to kind of keep the rule of thirds. A third of the landscape and then a third of the sky. Okay, and then this is the sky color. I didn't rinse my brush or anything, but I am going to dip in a little bit of water just to make that paint a little more fluid. But again, I'm not putting a ton of paint on here, just a little bit. So you're going to do the top 2/3 and the bottom third in water. Top 2/3 of sky and bottom third of water. And your water is the darker blue. Okay? I'm also going to dip a little bit in the lighter blue and kind of give myself a dry brush and put a little bit of reflection right here in the middle, maybe the sun. See how I did that? It doesn't take much, but it just kind of, your eye goes to it thinking, oh, well, that's where the sun is setting. That's where the light is coming from, whatever. The other thing I'm going to do is get my brush kind of dry and dip in the green paint here. And I'm going to emulate some trees. I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of pouncing to make some tree shadows. That's what I call it. It's just where the trees are off in the distance. I also want you to think about this. I like to paint my lake scenes with a little gap in the land. But so that it looks like you're kind of back in a cove or that there's a cove on the other side of this, but you could make the land go all the way across and that would look more like you're on the, in the water looking back at the shore. You could just have your land go part of the way and leave this part open. You can do this however you want, okay? There are lots of options there. But I'm going to leave a gap in the middle, kind of like I did on that one. And it doesn't matter how many trees you do. You're just going to keep doing a dry brush. You want it very, very subtle. This is off in the distance, okay? Because our trees in the foreground are going to be made of glass. Kind of overlapping them a little bit. Okay, now here's some more magic. We're going to get most of the paint off of our brush. And we're going to put a little bit of reflection down here in the water of the trees. See how I'm doing that? I'm just adding a little bit of green down here in the water so that it looks like the trees are reflecting into the water. All right? And then that's all we're going to do with our paint. with this green and blue paint. We still got to use our brown paint. Okay, so let's put our land in. This is our land, and it's this brown crushed glass. I'm going to dump it out on here in my workspace so I know what I'm working with. Some of them might be in big chunks. If they're in big chunks, you can just take your fingers and break them apart. This is tempered glass, so this glass actually came from a patio table. The top of a patio table, I cleaned it and broke it up. Measured it out and put it in your kits. See, I love to use recycled glass. Otherwise, this would just go into the landfill. So we're going to make our land here. We're just going to pile these up. Are they boulders or is it just land that is sparkly in the distance? I don't know. We're just going to pile this up. I'm putting it kind of, I mean, there's, you know, there's not a brown line there. I like to do it without a brown line or brown painting behind it because I feel like it just makes it more ethereal and it looks softer. If I painted brown land on here, it just wouldn't have the same glow from behind. I guess I'll let my land gap be right there because I've got trees over here. There we go. Piling this up. You'll have more than enough glass, just like the paint. I send way too much, but that's okay. I'd rather you have too much than not enough. You can make it tall in places if you want a little rise, a little hill. Up to you. It would be fun to include some real rocks in this if you wanted to. If you had rocks from a special place or vacation or something that you want to. Don't think for a minute that I don't gather tiny rocks and glass and sea glass and sand and all that stuff from everywhere I go. I always come home with a piece of the land with me, just a tiny piece, so I can include it in something later on. Okay. All right, so there we have our land. Are you all seeing what we're doing here, where it's going? This is one of my favorite little things to do. Okay, then you have 2 shades of green. So what I'm going to do is decide where my light is coming from. I kind of think the light is right here. So that means everything on this side is going to be lighter and everything on this side is going to be lighter. If there's foliage on this side, then it's darker. I'll show you what I mean. Let me dump this out. I'm going to sprinkle some of my light green where I want trees to be. Now, you don't have to sprinkle over the trees that you painted because those are just shadows. Those are shadowy trees off in the distance, or they can be. They could be trees that you painted, you know, straight up, but they could also just be shadowy trees off in the distance. Okay, so this is my light, because my light is right here in the middle where I drew my lighter colored water. Okay, so on this side then, the light is coming from this side. Now, if you don't get this right, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Maybe light is bouncing off of something. Maybe there are other lights around that you don't know about. I'm just showing you one way to do it. Making lots of trees off here in the distance. Now, I haven't painted my trunks yet because I don't know where my trees are going to go. So I usually do that last. Paint my trunks on because I like the freedom of piling up the glass everywhere. Okay, now it's time for my darker green glass. I'm going to scoop this out of the way. Again, you'll have way too much. Yes, I also cook for an army. I'm sure most of y'all do too. Always have leftovers. It's the same way with glass and paint. And you could save this and order some resin for yourself and do another project. When I have leftover glass like this, I sweep it all up and put it in what I call my confetti bin. So I have a bin of glass that's just fun odds and ends and extras, and sometimes I'll use it for things like a crowd at a baseball field or the crowd at the Kentucky Derby. I use my confetti bin for that kind of stuff. Okay, so see how I'm putting the darker glass on one side, kind of in a column? So the tree is split into two sections, the lighter side and the darker side. The darker side is away from the light source and the lighter side is toward the light source. And it kind of gives the illusion that there are shadows and light. And see how there's still some green that wasn't covered up with glass off in the distance? Okay, so this brush is new, and so it's going to be stiff. So you want to run it in some water first. Just get it wet to get that, you know, how they put glue or whatever it is on a brush before they ship it. So you just want to soften that up first. Now we're going to paint some tree trunks in here because I think that's enough trees for me. I'm going to move my glass out of the way. And if your brown is too thick, you can add a little bit of water to it. But I just dipped my brush in water just to get that glue off of it. And so it's pretty soft. You don't have to put a trunk everywhere there's a tree, and you don't have to have a tree everywhere there's a trunk. Because if you were to look into the woods, think about how you would see that. You wouldn't see always every trunk or every grouping of leaves above a trunk. Put some kind of close together, some a little bit thicker and some thinner off in the distance. This is your landscape. Make it your own. Okay, so the very last thing I'm going to do is this. It's like a light blue glass. I'm going to, again, dump this out onto my workspace. I'm going to place some of these pieces right on the water here. Now you can get crazy like me. Sometimes I enjoy really tedious work sometimes. And I will line these up, these tiny, tiny pieces into a row to give the illusion of light on a wave or a ripple in the water. If you line them up in a row, it looks like a ripple. It looks like a ripple of water. If you just kind of scoot them around. If you just plop them down, it still looks like water. It still looks like a ripple of water, but it's just got a little more, I don't know what the word is. If y'all think of the word, let me know. So you can line them up in a row. It just makes it feel more believable, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't have to be perfect, but a little bit straighter than just dumping them. If you had some white paint, you could paint white little dots, like little dashes, and then lay this glass right there with it too. If you're like me, some days you feel like lining this stuff up, and some days you might just want to dump it on there. Just depends. And I kind of just put it in the center part because I feel like that's where my light is. If you don't have any light, you don't see the ripples. Okay, so this one is ready. You want to make sure it's completely dry, and then you can pour resin on it. So, you know how I had paint in these cups? You could wipe that out if you wanted to. Or if you're working on plastic, which you should be working on plastic, like a trash bag or something. Okay, so I'm just going to turn these upside down like that. It's not going to hurt anything because you've got your plastic here, okay? And I'm going to set that up on the cup so it's like a little table. I guess I want to make sure that that paint is dry. Okay, so your resin packet's going to be like this. You're going to cut the top of it off like that, okay? Don't cut through the resin packet. This has all the safety information. If you want to read about it, you can do this indoors. You don't have to do it outside. I use only art resin because it has no VOCs. It has the highest UV rating on the market. I'm going to go ahead and put my gloves on. Make sure if you do this, that you do this in an area that it's not going to be disturbed for about 12 to 18 hours because it's going to be really sticky for that long. And if you have something with dog hair or pet hair, human hair, dust, bugs, gnats, whatever it may be. You do not want to have anything land in it or fall in it because it'll be stuck there forever. Okay, I'm going to put this hanger aside. I just want you to know that on the back, all you have to do when you pull your piece up is set down your hanger and use a screwdriver. It helps if it's an electric screwdriver, and screw that in, okay? And that's what you'll do when it's all finished and dried. So I'm going to take my resin and slide this clip off, this pink clip, okay? This, and you can throw that part away. All right, so it's 2 parts, and you have part A and part B, and we're just gonna mix them together. Mix them together like this for 3 minutes. If you don't, it will remain sticky and it will never ever cure. So this is a good job for the kids to do, but mom or dad or aunt or uncle or whoever, make sure that you come in behind them and make sure they have really been working this packet for that long. And when we go to cut this, we're just gonna snip this corner up here and we're gonna drizzle. Okay, we're gonna start with the glass first. I'm not gonna start drizzling out here to the side on the wood because the glass is the most important part to cover, and it will drain down and hit the wood, and then it's gonna drain down and land on your plastic tarp underneath. You want to pour over the glass part first, and then it'll fill in all that other area. Squeeze some out of that corner there. Again, this is just like our ketchup packets or our paint packets. And not cut a very big corner because we need this whole packet to cover this whole piece, okay? I'm going to start with the glass part. I know I need to cover that body there. And your resin will be warm enough after you've been massaging it and kneading it for that long. It'll be warm enough that it'll just drizzle down. But if you've kept it in a really cold environment, make sure you let it come to room temperature first. Okay, and I'm just drizzling over all of the glass first because it seeks the path of least resistance, so it's going to drain down between there. It's kind of like corn syrup, if you could imagine pouring corn syrup on this. And it'll drain down and hit that wood and spread out. This is what makes it so sparkly. Just remember, you have to be sure it is completely dry before you do this part. You don't want glue, you don't want any kind of wet paint, anything like that. Speaking of glue, if you're doing beads or something on here and you're having trouble with things staying where you want them to stay, you could just use a little bit of clear school glue. That works great to hold pieces in place until you can get them resined. I think we're good to go. I'm going to take my finger with my glove on it and kind of go around these sides and make sure these sides have some resin on them. You don't have to do that, but it will drip down on this side, and sometimes it looks just a little bit neater if you can clean up your sides like this. There we go, all set. All right, thank you all so much. Have a great day. Bye.